hear me here, I'm going to put this right here in this door thing. I don't know how that's going to work. We'll see. Let me get some sunglasses on here. My wife's coming over here.
I had to hang out my shoes. Figured since I saw you here, give you one more kiss.
Okay.
I love
Okay. Hopefully you can hear me. Alright, so I wanted to say something here, and that is that certainly nobody's forcing my hand, but I've kind of gotten to a point where I think it's time to sell this car. And for anybody who knows me, which most of you probably do not, this is a 2000 Nissan Sentra, and I'm 38 years old right now, and I bought this car in 2003, so I would have been 21 years old. This was the second vehicle I've ever owned. I bought the first vehicle I owned was a Jeep Cherokee, a 1993, and I drove that thing from 106,000 miles up to 189,000 miles. So I put whatever that is, 83,000 miles or something on it, and and I sold it, and I actually bought this car because my thought was the Cherokee was starting to get old. And it ran fine, but it was starting to kind of get old, and I wanted something that wasn't going to be a mechanical issue for me. Let me fix that phone. I just kind of have it sitting in this armrest here. So I bought this car, and I had both those vehicles for a short bit, and then I sold the Cherokee, and I had this car alone. This was the only car I had. I tend to be a guy of multiple vehicles. It's just how I've always been. So I owned this car for about 2.5 years, and then I bought a Jeep Wrangler, and I had both of those. And eventually I sold the Wrangler, and I bought a Ford Explorer. So I had both of those. Then I bought a Suburban. And there's a little bit of backstory in why I did that, mainly because I had a camper trailer that I needed to pull. So since Christmas Eve of 2014, that's the day I bought the Suburban. In some of my other videos, you probably see me driving that Suburban around. That's kind of frankly my main vehicle these days. So I basically drive the Suburban mostly, but so since Christmas Eve of 2014, I've had 3 vehicles, and of course now it's May 9th, 2020, so I've been running around with 3 vehicles, and it's not a problem for me. I can insure them, it's not a thing, but I've hung on to this car for so long. This is now coming up on 17 years of owning this vehicle. And I bought this thing with 36,000 miles on it. It's a 2000. I bought it in 2003, and I bought it with 36,000 miles on it used. I want to say I paid like $7,800 or something for this thing at the time. And I bought it. And it now has, just like the Jeep Cherokee did when I sold it, it now has 189,000 miles on it. So I've put whatever that is, 153,000 miles on this vehicle in the last 17 years. And it still runs like a top. I mean, it looks pretty rough. This is an inside shot, obviously, but it previously had sort of a beige paint on it. But I haven't garaged this thing in many years, so it's sat outside, and it's definitely had a toll taken on it. The paint is bad. The paint's bad. The tires are okay, but I put the tires on in 2011, so they're 9 years old. They've got probably something like 70. They probably have in the high 60s of thousands of miles on them. And there's a little bit of dry rot, but I still deem them as being safe, so I drive the car. But basically, I only drive this car to work and back, and even then, I only drive it about 2 or 3 days a week to work and back. So work for me is about 8 miles away. So, and I often came home for lunch, so I basically did 2 round trips a day. Let me fix this. So I would put about 32 miles a day on this car, times about 3. So I was putting maybe 100 miles a week, I guess you can say, on this car, which isn't too bad. But I bought this car when I was 21. I was still in college, and to be honest with you, I was still living at home. And this was the car I could afford. It was cheap. It was, you know, it was a cheap set of wheels, just like anybody does in their early 20s. And I tend to hang on to my stuff forever. It's just kind of how I'm built. Mainly because I pour my heart and soul into my stuff. And this car is really no exception. Even though this car came in good shape when I bought it, unlike a lot of my things, my airplane included, you know, I've always taken really good care of this thing. I've run synthetic oil in it. I've run Redline MT90 in the gearbox. I've really taken good care of it. The air conditioning works. I've done a lot of good things. I've always driven it gingerly. It's just how I roll. And but I've gotten to a point in life where, to be honest with you, I don't want to sound cocky or conceited or anything, but I've gotten to a point where this car is, frankly, a little bit beneath me. Hang on one second. I mean, I can go out. I'm fortunate. I've done pretty well for myself. I could go out and buy cash, you know, for a car today if I wanted to. But maybe not a brand new King Ranch F-150 or something, but you know, I could go to any place and get a respectable car and write a check for it and not have any issues. And of course, back when I bought this car, you know, I had a loan on it. I did pay it off in about 3 years, 2 or 3 years. I've always been against debt. But my tires are a little square. I haven't driven this car in 7 weeks because of the pandemic. I guess I should move over to the slow lane and kind of let these tires round themselves out again. But anyway, so I've gotten to a point where the paint is so bad on this car that, and it's just a little, I mean, I'm a big guy and I'm sitting here in a Nissan Sentra. It doesn't really fit in my life anymore. Plus, I'm a professional guy, and I'm a finance manager for a large company, and if I drive up to work in this, I mean, I could get by for a little while, but if I'm showing up at some kind of a professional meeting or something driving this, people are going to think I'm not very good at my job. It's just naturally the progression of life. You know, I bought this car as a 21-year-old kid, and I've managed to grow myself up to my late 30s in the swing of my career, and making good money, and you know, all of that this car just doesn't really fit in my life anymore. The only way to make this car fit in my life at this point would be to paint it, put new tires on it, probably put a spoiler on it, you know, try to make it kind of look new and sporty, like a little sports car or something. But the money it would take to do that, considering I've already got 189,000 miles on it, and you know, it doesn't make sense, especially when I can go buy myself a newer car that's got, you know, all the stuff that new cars have, and I can look like a guy who knows what he's doing. And so I have to figure out a way to sort of check my emotions and part ways with this vehicle and not have that bother me too bad. And that's kind of what this drive is about. I'm actually driving to the airport right now because I'm gonna fly. It's a beautiful day, and I figure no better thing to do on what will probably be the last trip that I ever take in this car. What better way to drive this thing to the airport, you know, because the airport's sort of my church, if you will. And in a way, the airport represents, to me, emotionally, the airport represents the pinnacle of my achievement. To be able to go out to that hangar and open that door and see my airplane and know that every last morsel of that came on the back of hard work, with these hands and this brain, you know, to earn the money to make all that happen. To me, it's just, I have other metrics in my life too, don't get me wrong. My wife came up and gave me a kiss before I left, and I've got a nice house, and there's a lot of good things in my life. I'm not saying I'm blessed on every front, but I'm blessed on a lot of fronts. And but going out to the airport to me kind of represents something that has always been a mainstay in my life, flying. Even when I bought this car back in 2003, I was already a commercial pilot, and I probably had 200 hours. No, I would have had more than that to be a commercial. I probably had 300. I was probably in the low 300s of hours when I bought this car. And I've driven this car so many places, and it's just been a fantastic car. And even though I've gotten to a point in life where, you know, the car and me kind of need to go in separate directions at this point, I still, even though it's just a piece of metal, anybody who's an airplane owner understands that a piece of metal can be more to you than just a piece of metal. And with 17 years of history in this car, I literally grew up in this car almost. As an adult, to go from 21 years old. I was a sophomore in college, you know, driving this car to USF and taking my accounting classes and reading. I've read many books right here on lunch breaks and stuff from jobs. And the very first professional level job I ever got out of college, I was working as a staff accountant at a small accounting firm. By the way, I loathed that job. I hated it. But it doesn't take away that it was my first job, and professional level job. I worked at Sam's Club and crap before that, but my first professional level job. And I drove this car there on day one, you know, and here I am now making 4.5 times what I made then. You know, I've got, what do I have now? 12 years of experience under my belt. You know, I didn't know accounting from my ass back then, and now I'm good enough. They pay me pretty well to do it. So this car has been a pivotal piece of getting me to and from everything that I've done that has been a part of getting me to this moment and where I am. So I know the car doesn't love me back, but I really do love this car, and I always will. But I cannot outmaneuver the logic that I just can't keep driving it really without. There's no upside really, other than just hanging on. That's the only upside to keeping this car, is hanging on and sort of delaying what would be I'm not gonna call it grief. It's not like losing a pet or a family member, but you know, in a way it's a family member. It's just a metallic family member. But anyway, so there's a guy that did our we had our bathroom shower re-grouted, and we had a curtain in there, and I got rid of the curtain, and we got a whole glass door installed, and we hired a guy to do that. And he specifically asked about this car, sitting in the driveway, and at the time I really wasn't ready to sell it, but it sort of planted a seed, and I was thinking, well, maybe someday, right? And then in about a month or so later, I just kind of said, you know what, it would be kind of nice to move on. I mean, it's progress. It represents progress, really, in some ways. And I have 3 vehicles, so when I sell this car, I'm not going to do what a lot of people do and just go buy another car. I'm good. I'm just going to go down to 2. And I still have the Explorer, and I still have the Suburban. And the Suburban really is my daily driver, and that's the one that I'm going to drive daily. And I like it. It's more becoming of somebody of my size, to be honest with you. I can get in and out of there easily. I can carry a lot of stuff. The only downside to the Suburban is it sucks about twice the gas that this car does. This car will get about 33 miles, 34 miles a gallon, whereas the Suburban will get about 16 or 17. So, but the reason I'm driving it right now is basically to take this video. I wanted to have something, I'll probably post this on YouTube, and I wanted to have something sort of memorable for myself. You know, because I remember when I sold my Jeep, I had the second Jeep, I had a green Jeep. I love that thing, and I honestly regret selling that Jeep, because unlike this car, the Jeep was in fantastic condition for what it was. It had a little bit of sun damage, but it was in fantastic condition, and I actually put a lot more of myself into that Jeep than I did this car. This car has always been loved, but it's always been a tool. The Jeep was kind of like the airplane. It wasn't a tool. Its primary purpose was to be something that was pleasurable. This car, the primary purpose was to facilitate me living my life, right? So it's a little bit of a tool, but I sold the Jeep because I thought about it for months and months, and I just couldn't outmaneuver the logic of selling it at the time, because I had bought a camper trailer. Actually, I had bought a boat, and the Jeep, it just struggled to pull the boat. It really didn't like pulling the boat. And so then I bought a Ford Explorer, and the Explorer pulls the boat without even knowing it's back there. But then I ended up having, you know, 3 vehicles at that point, actually. I had this car, I had that Jeep, and I had the Explorer, and I had 1 garage slot because I had to put the boat in the garage. So it came down to, do I put my nice Ford Explorer into the garage, or do I put the Jeep in the garage? And I wanted them both in the garage, but I couldn't. And I went back and forth, and I switched them out, and I figured out which one gives me the greatest happiness. And at the end of the day, I said, this Explorer is just too nice to sit outside. And so I put the Jeep outside, and then I was like, well, that really didn't sit well with me, and I just mind fucked myself for so long, and I finally said, you know what, the Jeep's got to go. The Jeep has got to go, because the Explorer can do everything the Jeep can do. It can pull, it can carry. Of course, the Jeep can't carry, but it's a better highway cruiser. It's a more comfortable ride. It's just, anybody who loves Jeeps understands the Jeep bug. I'm a guy who loves Jeeps, but when you push that aside, you cannot argue with this simple fact, and that is that a Jeep is a useless vehicle. It really is. I mean, it's good for next to nothing. And whereas the Explorer could do everything the Jeep could do, it could do it better, and it could do more. And so I'm thinking, well, I just couldn't keep the Jeep. I'm an emotional guy, but at the end of the day, it does come down to logic, and that's kind of where I'm at with this car. I'm in a similar place with this car right now. As I'm 38. You know, 7 months, I'm going to be 39. You know, I'm in the swing of my career. I'm paying down my house at rocket speed, trying to get some financial, you know, goals achieved, and you know, I can't hang on to this car I bought at 21 indefinitely, especially when it's a third vehicle. So especially when I come out to this airport. Like, airports are kind of for rich folks, and it's not like I need to look a certain way, but you got to be doing all right for yourself to pull into your private airport and your private hangar. And when I drive up in this hoopty, like it's like, which one of these things doesn't belong, you know? And that is part of my consideration. You know, I want to be able to pull up and talk to people and get out of a nice vehicle where people say, hey, this guy's solid, you know. But besides the emotional attachment to this car is beneath my stature at this point. So that being said, I think I'm going to sell it. I did some Blue Book. Oh, let me get back to the shower guy. I don't think I ever closed that loop. So the guy who did my shower, he's going to buy the car. And I did some, because I texted him the other day and I said, hey, I think I'm ready to do this. So we can go ahead and do this. And he was excited about it because he's one of these guys that seems like a super nice guy. He did a really good job on my shower door, but he's one of these guys that's you know, doesn't roll in money. So it's you know, for him getting a nice car like this for the price point that I'm selling it to him for, I think that's a really good thing for him. And it's better than some of the other people, because one of my concerns with selling this car is if I put an ad up for it on Craigslist or something, you know, I might get some kid, and I really didn't want to sell it to some 16-year-old kid. You know, I wanted to sell it to somebody who's a decent guy, you know, with the level of maturity, because this car has always been owned by somebody with a level of maturity, such as myself. And so I just I feel good about it. I like the guy. He's got 2 kids. You know, anybody who's really doing well for themselves is probably not going to want this car. So it's kind of a good exit strategy, I think, for me. I think when I thought about it, I was thinking, you know what? If I'm ever going to get rid of this car, this is probably the best scenario that I can imagine. So that being said, I looked up the value on Blue Book, and it looked to be, I called it in good condition. I think considering the paint and everything, there's no way I could call this thing in excellent condition. It does have some problems. It drives fine, but it does have some problems. And this is the original clutch with 189,000 miles on it. So it's just been a damn good car, and I bet you for the rest of my life I will never have a car that's been as trouble-free as this one has been. So I mean, I know that this car, they just don't make them like they used to. So it's just interesting to consider for me. I know anybody watching this video doesn't have the attachment, but the number of hours that I've sat in this seat and the number of years of my life that have passed as I've sat in this seat and driven this steering wheel to all these different places, building my life from 21 to 38, is pretty cool. It really is. And but that being said, I do believe it's time to part ways. And if that guy comes up with the money, I looked on Blue Book, and supposedly this car is worth $1,104, which I think is about right. It's a 20-year-old car, stick shift, with 189,000 miles on it, with bad paint and tires that are in their twilight. The interior is very nice. I've always been good on the interior. The windows are tinted. There's no bubbles in them or anything, so it's got a lot going for it. And but I think that's a fair price considering what else you can buy vehicles for. And so I offered it to him for $900. So he seemed excited about it. He's gonna bring me $900, and I'll give him the car, sign the title over, and that'll be that. So it's a little bittersweet to take this video, but you know, one thing about life is you can't stop change. Everything is always in a state of change, and I mean, I could sit here and say no, I don't want to sell it. I mean, I could certainly shut the deal down. The $900 doesn't mean much to me. It's not about the money, it's about just progress. And in my mind, it's like, do I really want to keep this car. Does that make sense? I don't know. I really do struggle with it. I mean, I drove it to the airport just now, and it did fine, and you know, it has its place. It's just not a car that I really enjoy driving anymore, and I feel kind of silly, like when I pull up and get out of it and somebody sees somebody of my size getting out of a car like this. Most people are going to think I work at Walmart or something. I mean, it's just how it is. Let me get a video on the outside. Ugh. So there she is, but you can see the paint. I mean, this is sheet metal. There's just no paint there anymore, and right here you can start to see, I don't know if you can see that or not. It's just a really old car, but man, this thing has been a fantastic machine for me. And let me see if I have anything in the trunk here. Here's the inside. It looks really nice. But more than likely, what I'm gonna do is, I got a jack and stuff. Let's see, is this jumper cables? That's just a bag. I think the cables are in another vehicle. So, but yeah, it's got, there's a spare under there and stuff, but it's got, but I mean, you can see it doesn't have a lot of paint. It's just an old, worn out car. I mean, there's no paint on this thing hardly. Look at that. I mean, look at this whole side of it. So that's why I say, I mean, $900 for that car is pretty good, but it's a very interesting thing for me to look at this car and think about everything I've done, how much of my life this car has been involved in, and it makes me a little bit sad. I can't deny it. I'm not like on the verge of tears or anything, but it does make me sad, you know, because it's like a grandmother dying, or my dog. My dog he's not dying yet, but he's old and he's got some issues, and you know, his birthday's coming up in about 2 weeks, I guess. His birthday's 2 weeks from today. So if he's still with me in 2 weeks, and I think the chances are high, he'll be turning 17. And my opinion is that will be his last birthday. I'm certainly not hoping for that by any means, but I would be surprised if he makes it to 18, to be honest with you. You know, the passage of life brings certain things and certain changes, and one of those is cars going away, one of them is pets dying, family dying. I have no more grandparents anymore. Back when I bought this car, all my grandparents were firing on all cylinders, except my paternal grandmother. She died in 1996. But my other three grandparents were firing on all cylinders and doing fine, you know, and you just think about everything that's changed and everything I've done and all the places I've gone, the literally thousands of times that I've driven this car to and from work, thousands of hours that this thing has sat in my work parking lot. I drove this thing to St. Louis back when I did the airline thing. I drove it to just tons of places. So it's a little bittersweet, but you know what? I got a lot of good things going for me, and it represents a good thing. It's not a sad thing, it's a good thing. I can't own this thing forever. I think that would be weird. I really think it'd be weird. And you can just see the car it needs somebody who's going to enjoy it for the time that it frankly has left, because it's not a new machine by any means. So you know, and my plan is to drive my Suburban. It's got 171,000 miles on it, and unlike this car, the Suburban actually looks good on the outside. It's white. It doesn't. I think it's a little more expensive vehicle anyway, so I think it has slightly higher quality paint. But you know, it's going downhill too. But I think the Suburban can get me another 4 or 5 years of daily driving. And I think in 4 or 5 years, my house will be long paid off. I'm sort of on the 2-year plan right now to pay my house off. And I'm not a guy who likes to get into debt. I hate debt. So I will never have a car payment or any kind of payment, frankly, once my house is paid off. So that being said, I kind of want to just drive the Suburban, and I'll probably get it from 170 to 200, 220,000 miles, somewhere in there. And then I'll probably sell the Suburban and I'll buy something decent, like really nice, with cash. You maybe a nice F-150 or quad cab F-150 or something, and I'll buy it cash and go from there. So and I still have the Ford Explorer, and I like it. But it's actually the nicest vehicle I have, but it's the one that's driven least. So, all right, enough yapping about this car. I'm gonna go fly and enjoy myself. The wind seems to be coming out of the west, so but I'm going to fly and enjoy myself, and I'll probably drive this car back home, obviously, and that'll probably be the last drive I ever do in it. So I'll sell it. I'll take my $900 and hope the guy enjoys it. I certainly drove this car for the majority of its service life. I think this car probably has another 50 or 60,000 miles in it. So if the guy takes care of it, I don't see any reason this car won't see 230, 240. I mean, but I don't want to drive it that long. That's just the reality. All my emotions aside, I just do not want to drive this car that long. So if I drove this thing that long, that would just frankly be silly. And with 17 years of sitting in that seat, I kind of want to see something a little different, to be honest with you. And in the cars today, they have so many cool things going on, and they just really do that. Why not? Why not? So that's kind of my 30-minute diatribe on my car. I appreciate you listening, and progress is evident in life in many ways, but one way is the fact that I'm about to walk in and see my airplane. And back when I bought that car, the concept of being able to afford an airplane was so far away. That's like asking an 8-year-old to buy one day when are you going to be able to buy a house or something. I mean, it's just the idea of when I was living at home, 21 years old, going to college as a sophomore, working at I guess as a sophomore I was probably working at Sam's Club. And then after Sam's Club, I actually worked for my brother. He had an online business. He still does actually, but I worked for my brother for a semester. And then I worked for a receivables company, which I hated that job. My first 2 professional level jobs I hated. Stand on a second. But we won't go down that road right now, but to be able to, it's just really cool to me to have built up enough life and to have accumulated enough things and gotten enough ducks in a row that I can see that car, which in a way represents the past, and yet see this airplane, which represents, for me, it's a symbol of the pinnacle of my success and what I've done so far. And it's just really neat to see that and this machine that I love so much, and then to see that and that machine that I love so much, but that one that kind of represents yesterday at this point. So anyway, I'm going to leave you with that. Thanks for listening, and sorry I took 33 minutes out of your life. See ya.